What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to The World According to Briggs and part 2 of the 10 Crazy American Conspiracies. I hope you enjoyed part 1. If you haven't seen it, there'll be a link at the end of the video, so you can go back and watch it. You don't really have to watch them in any order, so go back after this one. Since uploading the first one, I received more than a few emails. I normally get 1 or 2 per video, like the first day. I think I got 15. They all went along the same line. I didn't include one, and I must be working for the government. That always seems to be the theme. Basically, I didn't include the one they like, and that of course means I'm in on the conspiracy. Makes perfect sense to me. One guy informed me that if I knew it was good for me, I wouldn't get involved in subjects like this. He also asked if I knew who Jack Talbot was. I said no. His only reply was, exactly. I was like, okay, I have to admit, that was the best laugh I'd had all day yesterday. That was pretty good. Apparently, if you don't know who Jack Talbot is, I don't know, I guess you're in on the conspiracy? I went back and looked up Jack Talbot. There's nothing in on the internet about Jack Talbot, so I imagine that means there's a conspiracy going on. I don't know. It was weird. Anyway, there are some strange conspiracies and people in the United States, and that's what this video is all about. So let's check out the last 5. Number 5, Mount Rushmore. If you've ever seen the movie National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, you probably think that there's a secret room behind Abraham Lincoln's hairline on Mount Rushmore. Here's the thing. That's true. There is. Most Americans know Mount Rushmore is one of the most recognizable landmarks in the United States. It has the faces of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Teddy Roosevelt carved into it. We all had to learn about it at some point while we were going to school here in the United States. Not many people ever knew about the secret room, though. That was until Nicolas Cage introduced it to us in the National Treasure. And for many years, most people thought that was just part of the movie. No, like I said, it's real. You know, honestly, I think that was his last good movie. I mean, he was in some good movies over the years, but I don't know, somewhere around the late 90s, he started dishing out some turds. Too bad. Anyway, the sculptor Gutzon Borglum, who did the whole Mount Rushmore, created a room that is 74 feet long and 35 feet high. Borglum wanted it to be a place where we'd store all of America's prized possessions. It was supposed to be called the Hall of Records. He died before the room was completed. His family petitioned the government to finish the room. They finally approved it in 1998. He died in like 1941. When it was completed, they placed a bunch of historical documents like the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, in a sealed vault made of titanium. And they put a 2-ton slab of stone as a door on the front of the room. So nobody's getting into it. It's closed off to the public. And as we all know, if you close things off from the people, there has to be some conspiracy shenanigans, according to the tinfoil hat crowd. Some people believe the government is hiding something incredibly secretive there, like proof of aliens, who killed Kennedy, proof the moon landing never happened, and what the hell happened at the end of that show Lost. I know they got that secret someplace. Maybe that's just me. But there is no end to the theories about what's being stored there. I saw on a show one time where after the movie National Treasure happened, that became one of the most requested things from the Freedom of Information Act to what was actually in there. And I guess they had to field quite a few of those requests. Thought that was great. Like, you're going to be able to, get that information by sending in a form. Come on. Anyway, we know there's some valuable stuff there, if there is. I mean, they've got a titanium vault and they closed off. There's got to be something going on in there. Number 4, the weed conspiracy. I bet most of you didn't know that there was a marijuana conspiracy once. Actually, there's been a whole bunch, but this was like the first one. It all started back in the 1930s. I wasn't alive back then, but apparently the weed was really, really weak compared to what we have these days. Anyway, during the 1930s, machinery was developed for separating hemp fiber from the stalk, thus making widespread industrial use feasible. Apparently, hemp is a far superior fiber than cotton is. Anyway, not long after its industrial use became a thing, the conspiracies started. But the weird thing about this story, most of them ended up being true. Hemp futures looked good, and it also looked like it was going to destroy some other industries in the process. DuPont and oil companies had just obtained patents for making materials from coal and plastic from oil. The then Treasury Secretary, Andrew Mellon, was DuPont's chief financial backer. He was very rich, and he was one of the main money guys for DuPont. DuPont at the time was working on synthetic fibers that would later become things like nylon and polyester. Oil and cotton industries stood to lose billions of dollars if hemp wasn't outlawed, as would the Hearst newspaper empire, which owned large tracts of forest and paper mills. They had a whole bunch of secret meetings. Treasury Secretary Mellon appointed a family member to head the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Hearst's newspapers introduced the word marijuana into the language and inflamed the public with outrageous stories of drug-related violence and everything else they could think of. They were just making up horrible stories about what would happen to people if they smoked weed. The strategy worked. In 1937, Congress outlawed hemp by imposing a prohibitive tax on it. Basically, it made it too expensive to make. This crusade against hemp and weed went on for decades. Most people believe this is one of the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. Very few misinformation campaigns come near its success in eradicating competition while turning the populace against a product or an entire industry. It's crazy. What the propaganda campaign failed to mention was that industrial hemp is kind of worthless as a drug. The THC is far too low. Industrial hemp contains no psychoactive effects at all. There is low-dose melatonin that will get you higher than industrial hemp. Number 3, the Joplin tornado. Joplin, Missouri, in the southwestern part of the state near the Kansas and Oklahoma border, is just your typical Missouri small town and was home to about 50,000 residents in 2011. On May 22, 2011, the world learned about Joplin, Missouri. An EF5 tornado touched down near the western edge of the city among the larger, newer homes and traveled eastward across the city and across Interstate 44 into the rural portion of Newton County. About 2,400 houses, 1,000 cars were flattened or simply just blown away. The tornado narrowly missed the downtown part of the city. This would have been even more devastating than it already was. This was one of the most deadly tornadoes on record, with winds reaching 200 miles per hour. The tornado killed 161 people. The insane strength of this tornado led to the conspiracy theories. The most popular theory is the tornado was created by the U.S. military at the facility up in Alaska, not even kidding, known as HAARP. We've talked about this before. They blame everything on HAARP. The facility studies the Earth's upper atmosphere, but many believe it can create hurricanes and tornadoes, like the one in Joplin. HAARP gets accused of everything nature throws at us. You name the natural disaster, and I promise you'll find at least one website saying that it had something to do with HAARP. I'm still waiting for them to blame the pandemic on HAARP. One guy tried to blame his erectile dysfunction on HAARP. Climate change? Obviously it's HAARP, they say. Ocean levels rising? HAARP. I'm sure when that whole Yellowstone supervolcano blows up, they're going to blame HAARP for that too. Number 2, the Centralia coal mine fire. In 1962, the town of Centralia, Pennsylvania, lit a landfill on fire to get rid of some trash. What I guess never occurred to the trash fire dude was the coal mines under the town might catch fire. They did. That same fire still burns today. Centralia's strange story doesn't start there. The town was settled in 1841 as Bullhead, and then in 1866 it was incorporated as the borough of Centralia. 2 years later, Alexander Ray, the town's founder, was murdered in his buggy by members of the Molly Maguires on October 17, 1868, during a trip between Centralia and Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. 3 men were eventually convicted of the death and were hanged on March 25, 1878. Now, if you don't know what the Molly Maguires are, they were an Irish 19th century secret society active in Ireland, Liverpool, and parts of the eastern United States. They were famous among the Irish American and Irish immigrant coal miners in Pennsylvania. Their history remains part of Pennsylvania folklore. These guys were legendary back in the day, sticking up for the Irish, who were pretty much, taken advantage of and abused for a lot of years back then. Anyway, back to the coal mine trash heap blaze. The fire spread through the coal mines that were under the town. Eventually, the fires made the town unsafe to live, forcing people to move away. Like I said, the fire still burns today, so nobody's moving back. Some believe there's more to the story. The government forced most of the residents out of the town. I say most because some in what the government deemed safe areas were allowed to stay. There are some who think the government actually started the fires to force people out of the town so they could just collect billions and billions of dollars worth of coal. According to a local Pennsylvania website, Penn Live, whatever coal remains down there is pretty much worthless at this point, and even more so as coal declines. Some of the tinfoil hat crowd believe that some of the people that were allowed to remain in the town were actually government lookouts that were placed there to make sure nobody went snooping around their coal mining operation. Some believe the Molly Maguires are still active in the area. I find that one a little far-fetched. And number 1, Enoch Lincoln. Enoch Lincoln was a famous poet and early advocate for black and women's rights in New England, which at the time was a crazy position to be taking. This was some 30 years before the Civil War, so at the time this made him seem a little crazy to some and hated by others. Nonetheless, in 1826 he was elected Maine's 6th governor. During his term, he chose the current site for Maine's capital. When he died 3 years later, in 1829, his body was placed in a crypt. In 1991, an inspection of the crypt found no remains at all. There was no body in the casket or crypt or whatever. Lincoln's body was missing, and this sparked a slew of conspiracy theories. I've read a whole bunch. Some are really weird and out there, but some of the more realistic ones are, some say his death at the time was a hoax. They think he faked his own death or some secret society helped him. Others say state workers may have cleaned up the tomb at some point and just forgot to put the body back, which, okay, that's weird. Others theorize the governor was never buried there at all. His body has never been found. Now, the state worker thing, I don't get. I mean, who cleans up a crypt and then puts everything back together and then turns around and goes, oh man, we forgot the body. Just throw it in the trash. Let's move on with our day. You know, who forgets to put a body back in the crypt? When you've been tasked to do a job, and it involves cleaning a crypt, aren't you going to kind of keep an eye on the remains and make sure they don't wander off or something like that? I don't know, that one's weird. I kind of believe maybe he faked his own death. Or he was never buried there at all. They just put it as a marker at the time, like here's where the governor is buried, and then maybe the family buried him on the family land or something like that someplace else. Who knows? That one's a little weird. That's worth some good reading there. If you can find anything, it's really hard to dig anything up on this guy. And it's even harder to dig him up, I guess. Alright, so that's today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you like the conspiracy stuff. Don't forget all the links below. Give the video a big thumbs up if you like what we're doing here. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.